Hi, my name is Shraddha Rathod, and today I will be exploring lie detection, specifically with technologies of EEG and fMRI. Lying. People lie for many different reasons. People do it all the time, whether it's about presidential inauguration audience sizes or why they're late to work. And the motives can be different. Sometimes people lie to inflate their image, or sometimes people lie to cover up bad behavior. We all know Ryan Lochte's stunt that he pulled at the Brazil Olympics. People even lie to get further in work when it comes to creating fraudulent data or numbers. But come on, why you always lying? Because let's be honest, sometimes it's hard to tell whether someone is lying not just by looking at them. One may argue that you can draw conclusions from body language, tone of voice, or eye movements. However, since everyone's interaction style is so different, it is hard to draw any conclusions from those observations. So, we needed a different kind of test. Therefore, the polygraph test, commonly known as the lie detector, was introduced in order to bring physiological elements into the equation. Yep, this is the one you see on all of your guilty pleasure crime TV shows that I know you watch. Don't worry, I watch them too. During these tests, three indicators of arousal are assessed. Here they're listed: heart rate and blood pressure, respiration, and skin conductivity. Heart rate is assessed by a blood pressure cuff. Respiration is measured by pneumographs wrapped around a subject's chest, and skin conductivity is measured through electrodes attached to a subject's fingertips. So, these indicators are supposed to indicate whether a suspect or client is deceptive or not. So, in deception, you can see a greater physiological response to relevant questions than to control questions. On the contrary, you see a greater response to control questions in non-deception. If no difference is found between relevant and control questions, then the test result is considered to be inconclusive. Most court cases in the US find polygraph tests inadmissible as evidence since it is not 100% accurate, although the process is still used in screening, witness questioning, etc. You can see that the danger of the polygraph test is apparent, with a risk of false confessions and wrong information. So the search for an accurate lie detector is still on. Researchers have now turned to researching neural-based lie detection, so I will further talk about EEG and fMRI-based lie detection. So let's start with EEG. According to Johns Hopkins Medicine, EEG is a test that detects abnormalities in brainwaves or the electrical activity in your brain. More specifically, an EEG records the polarity change in neurons when signals are transferred from one to another, or synaptic activity. Technically put, it records the postsynaptic dendritic currents from cortical pyramidal cells. An EEG cannot measure this activity from a sole neuron though, but can measure the activity of a group of neurons, or LFP, local field potential. This recording is done by placing small electrodes on the scalp through which we can read tiny electrical charges using an amplifier. It is able to provide active brain area information at even sub-second scales and is one of the fastest imaging technologies available to date. So once we get the waveforms from an EEG, we want to analyze it to see what state a person is in. When analyzing these results, we can determine the state of the person by analyzing certain wave frequencies. So the delta waves are often associated with deep sleep, theta usually with cognitive processing such as memory encoding and memory retrieving. Alpha is often associated with relaxed awake states, beta with executing physical movements like walking or running, and gamma has yet to be determined. Some people like to associate gamma with data exchange in brain regions, within brain regions, while others associate it with rapid eye movements. So now we have to gather this waveforms and figure out what we should look for to determine if someone is being deceptive. When people are reminded of something they've personally experienced, whether it's an object, person, or event, or an experience, their brains usually produce a specific brain wave, the P300 wave, for just a fraction of a second. Researchers from Northwestern carried out a study to test the P300 brain wave, in which they asked participants to pretend that they were part of a deadly terrorism plot. The subjects wrote a letter to the leader of the plot, noting that there would be a bombing in Houston in July. Later, the participants were shown keywords bomb, Houston, and July, while being recorded on an EEG. Their P300 brainwaves were significantly larger after reading those words than they were after reading other words not mentioned denoting different weapons, cities, or months. So, when questioning a suspect or client, officials will ask three types of questions: questions that should be known, information that shouldn't be known, and information that only people having to do with the situation would know. Because the P300 wave is known to be activated by familiarity, it can be analyzed using these three types of questions to determine truth or not. You can use machine learning to use an EEG as a lie detector as well, by calibrating these signals with the response to each of these types of questions. So, the use of the EEG-based technologies to test guilty knowledge was thought of by U.S. scientist Larry Farwell. An Iowa district court admitted EEG evidence in a court ruling one time, but later, when the case was seen at the Iowa Supreme Court, it was not able to consider the EEG data as it's not as reliable right now. So the reliability still hasn't been proven, but the studies are being done to try and further study EEG light detection. So next we'll talk about the fMRI. Here you'll see an fMRI brain scan, or functional magnetic resonance imaging. First, we'll try and understand what an MRI is. You've probably seen these MRI scanners around, but how do they really work? MRIs work by using a strong magnetic field to cause the hydrogen nuclei in your body to line up with the field. After a radiofrequency magnetic pulse is applied at the needed frequency, the hydrogen nuclei absorbs energy, creating a short small signal called an MR signal. By analyzing the MR distribution map and changing up the RF signals, subtle changes in brain anatomy can be traced. Cool, am I right? So this technology is later applied further into fMRI. So fMRI takes this a step further by applying the same concepts of MRI to brain activity, because it was observed that when neural activity in an area is increased, MR signals seem to also increase a tiny amount. And when I say a tiny amount, I mean tiny, about 1%. So why does this MR signal change in response to brain activity? This is pretty much the underlying concept of fMRI lie detection. The underlying principle is that the MR signals are actually affected by the changes in blood flow after the neural activity. Higher oxygenated blood tends to create a stronger MRI signal because of the way hemoglobin binds to oxygen in the blood. So fMRI can be analyzed via this oxygen level to determine deceptive or non-deceptive statements. So since active parts of the brain use more oxygen than inactive portions, the fMRI can accurately pinpoint the parts of the brain at work at any given time. Some scientific studies have shown that lying activates different parts of the brain than being honest does. For example, some recent work by Civilis, Otten, and Rugg suggests that seeing familiar names or faces produces distinctively different areas of brain activation than unfamiliar names or faces. In another study, fMRI was used to study deception, in a task in which examinees were instructed to be truthful or to lie. This experiment indicated that while lying, compared to truthful responses, examinees exhibited significantly greater activation in the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex and the medial prefrontal cortex. Some studies have also been done by using the fMRI and the polygraph simultaneously. The results of these studies illustrate how the relationship between brain function and behavior can be understood in more detail when information on the former is directly available. But are these methods reliable enough to use yet? Although tempting, like Aladdin, these technologies are not closed for use in serious matters. It is important that these tests are accurate before use because wrong results could potentially ruin many people's lives. So, is the EEG ready or not? EEG relies on familiarity, as we learned before, to prove guilt in a test, but many experts would agree that there is no established marker for familiarity. There have been many false positives, with some putting the error rate at around 15 to 30%, which is pretty big in terms of the applications of lie detection. And lastly, a single trial analysis of EEGs is almost impossible given the signal-to-noise ratio. One would need to average many such trials to get any kind of result at all. Next, we have the fMRI. fMRI technology has potential for lie detection, but these results cannot be trusted yet. To date, all fMRI lie detection studies have only used a small number of subjects, all of who were asked very simple things, such as to identify the playing card in their hand. How these findings will bear out in real-life circumstances with diverse subjects of diverse races and ages and mental states remains to be seen. There are some limitations to the brain there are also some other limitations. The brain regions activated by deception in this research don't necessarily become active during deception. So identifying those areas of brain activation that are specific to deception have not yet been found. So lie detection is an intriguing subject today as it would make the work of the justice system easier. It is often portrayed in media as a very accurate and cool technology, but reality is there's still a lot more work to be done. As we learn more about the brain and neural signals, technologies such as EEGs and fMRIs have potential to be applied in the real world, but as of now, more studies must be completed.